And welcome to from the Philippines. Interesting. Enjoy your trip visiting family. Welcome to our chat regarding First Law. We are Celebrity, my friend Caleb, who is part of the 2023 BookTube class. And you probably know who I am, but if not, I'm Fantasy Awash, and we're here to gush about First Law and all that the first three books have to offer. Caleb just read it. Yes, it is quite nice. I read them last year, fell in love with Joe Abercrombie, his style of writing. Hello, Britain. And have been screaming from my soapbox at everyone in our Discord that they should read it, specifically that they should be listening to the audiobooks of this series. So you just read it, and I think you ended up enjoying it too, right, Caleb?
Yeah, I'd read The Blade itself. That would have been like 2012, 2013.
Okay, so it was a while ago.
Yeah, a while ago. And then I never finished before they were hanged. I think I got about halfway through it and then DNF'd for some reason because I'm a monster. And then I was talking to you and I was like, yeah, I've been meaning to finish that series. And you were like, oh, you should read it again and you should listen to the audiobooks.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll get around to that. And you're like, are you done yet?
Yeah. I think anytime someone starts a book that I'm really excited, I'm that annoying person that just keeps poking. And I'm like, hey, how far along are you? Are you really enjoying it? Do you like it as much as I do? Please tell me that you love it.
Tell me it changed your life.
I want it to have changed your life the way that it changed mine. But I will say, in terms of books, we're going to start our chat with kind of doing non-spoilery, just talking about Joe's style of writing, and then we can get into the nitty-gritty of spoilers, but we'll do that in a little bit. But with me, Joe Abercrombie became, hello, Derry, a really significant turning point for me in terms of my reading, because I felt until him that I was more driven by plot. Like I needed the plot to be steadily moving. And then as soon as I read him, I was like, oh, I don't really care about the plot. I only really care about the characters, and became a very character focused and character-driven reader. And I found that a lot of people have felt that way after reading him. Do you feel like that has affected your reading at all?
I think reading Abercrombie has certainly made me appreciate more character-oriented work. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm like gung-ho on character-driven stuff because I own, at least in most everything I've read, no one does it like Abercrombie does.
He's unique.
It's tough because Abercrombie's characters are so compelling and they're so interesting to read about. I could just read about any of them all day, every day. And with very few exceptions, no other author like does that. I'm more interested in world building and plot.
Yeah, I completely get that. It's funny you mentioned that because I'm in the midst of reading the final book of the standalones right now, and I'm not loving it the way that I've loved some of his other books, but it's one of those things that I'm still reading it and I'm like, it's still a good book. Like it's just setting wise, not something that I super enjoy because it's a Western and I really don't jive with Westerns, it seems like, but you still read it and you go, the characters are still great. Like it's just something that I feel is kind of reinventing in our fantasy space, like how to be a character author.
Oh, yes, 100%.
Derry is our big proponent always of Robin Hobb.
I've read Assassin's Apprentice, and Hobb was who came to mind to me for like, yeah, that's the other person I really like character work from.
Yeah, the two of them kind of get equated to each other pretty regularly. As soon as you tell someone, I love Abercrombie, they usually follow it up with, have you read Robin Hobb? Or vice versa, you say you love Robin Hobb. Oh, have you heard about the Lord Grimdark, Mr. Joe Abercrombie? Black Leopard.
Laura. Black Leopard
Don't
Red
think
Wolf
that's for me.
It's a very interesting book. I think you should read it actually. But
maybe one day.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that a whole different thing. That's a whole
different chat. Yeah.
On.
So in terms of the first three books, because we are going to limit our conversation to the first three because Caleb has just finished the first trilogy. I'm eager for him to get on to the standalone so we can talk about those because the Heroes is one of my all-time favorite books.
Came through on my Libby, so
it's happening. But once you get to the Heroes, I'll be really excited. But in terms of the first 3 books, let's even start with book 1. What do you feel it was that really pulled you into the story and you were like, "Yep, I'm invested"?
This minor character named Sans Dan Glocta.
Yes, Sandanglocta.
That's it.
My
That's
truest of true loves.
truly the GOAT of all characters.
Oh, he's my favorite character. It's my husband has now heard me go on about this pretty regularly. I'm like, there is no one better than Sandanglocta. Even
Darren, we're in
though
the
Glock
Discord
does not.
together.
Yeah, I know. Glockta's not his favorite character though. He's a Jazal
What?
stan. Yeah, he loves Jazal. He loved Jazal from the very beginning.
In the first book, he liked Jazal.
In the first book, which I mean, like, Caleb has gotten to know my husband well because fun little side plot here. Caleb and I are in the same writers group, and my husband is part of that group too. So I don't feel like it's surprising once you get to know Josh that he really would like Jazal, but
Yeah,
simultaneously, I sit there and I'm like, it's not even comparable.
I guess I
Glockta.
could see it, but I'm like, I think Jazal has a great arc overall through all 3 books.
He
But
does.
even me like ranking everyone, I'm pretty sure Jazal is like near the bottom for me.
Oh, really? Okay. I still really like him, but for
I mean,
me, Glockta.
I say that in the context of, in a weird way, I love all the characters. So
Yes. Yeah, it was funny because I had seen people doing reviews about this on BookTube, First Law specifically. I didn't watch any of the reviews, but people kept saying like, "Oh, you should read this book." And a couple years ago, I joined a Facebook group for fantasy readers, and specifically was looking for Christmas gifts for Josh. And I typed in, "These are the books that he's really liked. These are the books that he has not really liked. What can you tell me that he would probably really love?" And a ton of people said First Law. They were like, sounds like it's going to be right up his alley, and he's probably going to love this character, Glopta. I think out of the 160 to 300 comments I got, like half of them mentioned First Law, and of the half that mentioned First Law, half of those mentioned Glopta. And I remember I gave him the book, and I was like, when you're done, tell me who your favorite character is before I read it, because I'm curious, because everyone keeps telling me it's going to be this one guy. And when he read it and he's like, "Yeah, it's Jazal," I was like, "Nope." Like, that's
not what I thought.
Not what I was expecting, but okay.
But in terms of like what really poured me into the book, it really is the characters, and that's pretty much everything about it, right? Abercrombie writes characters so compellingly, and he really gets into the psychology of each character so well. It's just fascinating to read.
Yeah, I agree. Any other non-spoilery things you would like to say before we jump in?
I mean, if you're in the chat and you haven't read it, this might be the time to stop. But they're good. I think the other thing about Abercrombie is like he's so genuinely funny. I mean, I straight up laughed at certain parts in these books.
Yes.
Something I very rarely do.
Yeah, it takes a lot for me to laugh out loud. Like, I'm pretty stone-faced when I read or when I listen to something. So if it's either, I've cried at one book in the last 15 years, and I usually then never laugh unless it's Neil Gaiman or Terry Pratchett and or Joe Abercrombie. Like, those are the authors that make me laugh.
Yeah,
and
even if
Joe
I find
had me laughing early. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just gonna say, even if I find something funny in a book, I'm like, I like do like a little nose laugh. But these books, I like literally cackled at while I was listening to it at work.
Same here. Within the first Glocta chapter, okay, we're gonna switch over to spoilers here. So I'm gonna give everyone a minute here. If you haven't read these books, please go read these books, then come back and listen to this video. If you are an avid reader of Joe, you're welcome to stay. But I feel like we've given you enough time now. Click off. We are going to start talking about spoilers now. Glocta's opening chapter about walking up the stairs had me in stitches. I was sitting in my living room. My daughter had just gone down for a nap, and I was like, oh crap, I'm gonna wake her up, because I was laughing so hard. It was so funny, and it just continued from there. His inner monologue work is the best.
And the fact like literally the whole chapter is him going down the stairs.
Yeah, and it's great. The whole chapter is great. I agree, Britton. Abercrombie is a master of figuring out whether or not people actually do change. And I think the conclusion that we came to is that they sort of can, but not really.
But not really.
Maybe very, very little. I didn't hate him at the beginning either. I didn't dislike him as much as other people, for sure. But Glocta, all the way.
Yeah, I mean, like I really like. I think I like to hate Regizal, especially in the first book, because he's such a prick, and I really love that. But I would not want to actively spend any time around him.
Yeah, Derry, I haven't read any Jay Kristoff yet.
I haven't
you
either.
read? Okay, yeah, maybe that's something we can venture into together because I've seen a lot of his stuff coming up lately. But so the first book, right? Of the first 3 books, his first law trilogy, The Blade itself is my favorite book.
Really?
And I think you said it was maybe yours, or no, it was not yours, right?
It's hard for me to kind of decide which I really like more than the others, because I really view it as one story, like the whole trilogy. Because I think that's my big critique, is I don't really feel like the books completely hold up on their own. They kind of like require you to keep reading to get the most out of it. I almost want to say The Last Argument of Kings is my favorite. Just in the way like everything comes together, and like the big reveal at the end like made everything before it so worth it.
Sure. So let's go in order, though.
We'll talk about that. But I love The Blade itself.
Yes. So Blade itself, for me, I think what was so interesting is that a lot of people like to say that there's not much plot that happens in The Blade itself, but I personally feel like there is a good amount of plot. I'm like, it's just slow. Like, it's really slow because it's all so character driven. But I loved the introduction of Baez into the story because I love Baez. Baez is the baddie that I absolutely love to love. And I really liked that he was kind of the only real magic user. And even then, it was really ambiguous as to what his magic could pretty much do. For people who are familiar with the Pixar movie Inside Out and Anger, that's how I picture Baez. Like, he's just something that catches on fire. And I think it's great. I love it so, so much. But I really loved that dynamic in the story, especially because I feel like so much of our current fantasy market is this really high fantasy system, and it's all very technical magic. Yeah, it's super technical, and this was a real switch from a lot of what we were seeing, I feel like, in most of our other stories.
100%. And that's something I love about the series overall, is I love how vague and ambiguous like pretty much everything before like the founding of the Union is. And like, yeah, because even by the time you get to the end of the 3rd book, you understand basically nothing about how the magic system works. I love that. Like, I love my magic to be like way more mysterious. Like, this is the thing I will always critique Brandon Sanderson for, is I don't really care how the magic works.
Sure. I'm very similar in that I don't need to know the minutia and all of the specifics. So I kind of like when there is this air of mystery. I was actually a part of a really fun conversation this weekend that's going to be coming out, I think next week or in 2 weeks from now. I'll let you guys know. But it was on Do Unicorns Read channel, and we were talking about religion and fantasy and how we have really systematized magic in fantasy, and how magic and religion are obviously very intertwined in most stories. And systematizing magic has made it really boring a lot of the time, because it's either, oh, is this high magic? Oh, is this low magic? And I feel like at times in First Law, it feels like it could be high magic. And then at other times he's like, no, there's nothing here.
And that's kind of the genius of it, I think. Is like you feel like the characters who can do magic understand how it works, but it's beyond the comprehension of most everyone else. And
exactly,
that can come off like lazily in a lesser writer, but I think Abercrombie does it perfectly.
I agree completely. Okay, so let's get into our character work a little bit in book 1. Obviously, Glocta, we are Glocta stands. I think we've established that.
He's just great.
How can you not be? He's just perfection from start to finish. I love him so much. I will say, though, in terms of peak Glocta, I feel like it's book 2 for me.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, I loved the Dagosca storyline so much. I also loved his letters and like inner monologues with Salt. I thought those were so funny. But what's so fascinating about Glocta is that he's a character who is inherently evil, right? But then does good things occasionally. So it's really hard to place him in the sense of, do the good actions override the bad actions? And Logan, I feel like in many ways is very similar in that as the Bloody Nine, he does a lot of atrocious things, but as Logan, just Logan, he's not that terrible of a human being.
He's actually really kind of like sweet. He's like a big teddy bear.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think between that, the difference between those two that is interesting is, I think, largely intent. I think Logan really intends to be a good person most of the time until like his bloodlust kind of takes over. Yeah. Whereas I feel like, except for a few certain instances, I would say Glotka doesn't really do good things because they're the right thing to do, but more because it's his job to get to that end.
Correct. So Derry's question here, and I think it's an interesting one, is Logan Ninefingers a separate entity to the Bloody Nine, or is Logan a berserker in denial? I like to think they're two separate people, but I think it's, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get rid of that. I almost wonder though if it's meant to be a Jekyll and Hyde type situation where, you know, because it doesn't ever really feel like he super remembers the extent of what he does when he goes into that state. I think it's in Before They Are Hanged. I could be wrong, so correct me if you remember, Caleb. But when he and Pharaoh are in that underground, not like cave, but it's a room, like an old temple or something, and he ends up killing like 30 of those people whose name is escaping me right now.
It's escaping me too, but yeah, you know, it's right there at the end of the book.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, those guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, because like
Britton, that's 1 second. I'm sorry, Britton. I'm deleting your comment just so Caleb doesn't see it. But I did not figure it out. But I am past that point in the book. The Shanka. Yes, thank you. That's who it was. But there was that moment in that scene with the two of them, and I was thinking, like, does he actually know what he's doing? Because it kind of felt like he didn't. And up until that point, I wasn't really sure.
Yeah, to me, it feels like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing, or like there's some sort of like maybe multiple personality disorder thing going on.
Yeah.
Because even in Before They're Hanged, in the Blade itself, when they're getting attacked by like the assassins in the city, he kind of has like this like snap moment where he's just very different than he has been the whole book.
Right. Yeah. Berserker in Denial, good description and consistent with how I saw him is another one. I do think it's supernatural. Yes, and this is another thing, is that he could talk to the spirits. Something that I really loved, and I don't know if it was perfect the way that it was, but I almost wish there would have been more of it, is that the spirit that comes to talk to him tells him that he's the last one, basically. Like, there's no more. Everyone's real tired and they've all gone to bed. And I thought that maybe would have been so interesting to kind of get more detail about these spirits, but I almost wonder if at some point maybe he'll do a prequel trilogy and we'll get more of the spirits. But that was another little hint of that magic that was just kind of infused into our story, and it added this level of mysticism to the North, which otherwise was quite dreary and boring to me. Especially in book 1. I think I was in the minority opinion that, especially in book 1, the scenes that take place in England to me were by far the least interesting. I liked Logan as a character, but I didn't really care about a lot of the Northmen in terms of our captain that gets sent to the North. Like, I didn't really care about that storyline either. How did you feel about our England storyline?
Yeah, I think I more or less agree. I did not really care about the England plot until the 3rd book, when it was all like really coming to a head. And I was like, oh, this is
Yeah.
awesome. But I agree. Like Dogman's plot, I did not feel like I cared about Dogman like literally at all until book 3.
Yeah.
And like I liked Wes' character journey through book 2 when they're in
Yeah.
England, but that's it.
Yeah,
Because
I really struggled with West personally. Like
mhm.
I was interested in the dynamic between him and Giselle in book 1 in that it's very much a discussion of privilege, and that
Mhm.
Giselle is this very privileged individual and West has had none of that and looks at Giselle with quite a bit of animosity, and it's justified. I really turned on him though when he backhanded Artie. I was like, no, I'm done.
No. Wes, you
Yeah,
fucked up.
I was absolutely done with him. I was like, it's over. Any semblance of relationship that you and I had is now done. So I didn't feel too bad for him in the end. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because like I never feel like he really had like a redemption arc. Or like West is one of the characters where everyone else kind of like stayed the same or got better. West
yes.
kind of got worse as the story went on.
It's funny you think that. That's sort of true in many ways. Yes, bards and books. The Northman crew were absolutely badass. Loved West as well. Derry also loved West. I loved the Northman crew. Black Dow was my favorite. From like the second he walked on the page, I was
Oh,
like,
then
oh,
you really loved how this trilogy ended.
yeah, I loved Black Dow so much. And I was very, very happy with how his storyline went. I was sad with some of the Northmen, like Grim. I really liked him and him not making it. But you knew, right, that not all of the Northmen were going to be walking out of this situation alive.
um,
Him backhanding Artie was the moment it felt real to me. Yeah, I agree. It's hurt people, right? It's repeating cycles of violence and abuse, and
yeah,
it makes me
I think.
interested to see Artie as a mother in the Age of Madness trilogy. I'm really looking forward to
Oh no, I don't even
it.
want to think about that. I think because like I know they talked about, I know West and already talked about how tough their childhood was, but I don't really feel like there was that type of anger in West until that moment.
I agree.
So
I
like
feel
it
like it
kind of
was
came out of
harbored.
nowhere to me.
Yeah.
I didn't hate it obviously, but like
Yes.
I think it could have been built up to a little better.
I think it was harbored more in Artie's character,
Mm-hmm.
personally, which her alcoholism, I feel like, was directly linked to this and her self worth. Like, Artie is a character to me that has very little to no self worth.
Mm-hmm.
She unfortunately has this tumultuous relationship with her brother, had a horrific relationship with her father, and realizes that the only true advantage that she has is her appearance. Giselle feeds 100% into that. And as much as I do feel like they could have had a very good relationship. Giselle is Giselle at the end of the day, and it wasn't going to be a happy ending for the two of them. But I
Mm-hmm.
do think in many ways that she and Glocta are evenly matched. And I was so nervous in the final book in the scene where he ends up proposing to her. I was like, oh shit, he's going to kill
Yeah,
her.
I know. That's exactly what
Uh,
I thought too.
yeah, it was such a great fake out, and I appreciated that so much. I was like, "Oh man, I thought he was going to do it, especially after he let that woman go from D'Agosto, whose name is escaping me." Which ended up coming back to like bite him in the ass a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because she was just terrible. So I was like, well, he's not gonna make the same mistake here twice. But clearly he was good to go. Yes, I love the idea of Artie and Glocta. I think they are a great pairing. And even at the end, when she basically mounts him in his bed and starts making out with him, she's like, I'm here to do a job and I'm gonna do it well.
Yeah, I could, and like I, part of me knew that that was the arc it was going to take just by their interactions in the beginning of Last Argument of Kings.
Mm-hmm.
You could feel not like romantic chemistry, but at
Yes.
least platonic chemistry between them.
Yes.
So I felt like it was gonna go that way, and I was like, oh no, it's gonna end badly, like it did for everyone else.
Right. Well, it was romantic, I feel like, from Glocta's perspective, just because Glocta looked at anyone that was attractive, and I felt like he had that connection, but then remembered what he now was, which is
Yeah.
such an interesting added layer to Glocta because Jazal is Glocta before torture. Like
Yeah.
that's Glocta.
That's a good
Just
point.
moderately more talented, I feel like, because Glocta didn't need anybody to intervene for him to win his challenge.
Yeah. And I think a fun thing too, now that we're kind of talking about the end, is in the play itself, Glocta has that dream where he basically like cuts down Jazal and makes out with Artie. And
Mhm.
that's kind of how the series ended.
Yeah.
And I
100%.
love the fact that like the only person who like besides Baez who gets like even remotely a good ending is like objectively the most horrid character.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's okay. So let's talk about our master Baez and the title master here being very appropriate because he is our little puppet master behind the scenes. Did you realize it was him that was going to be running the bank? Because I didn't.
No.
Yeah.
The whole thing, I mean, I was surprised. Like his scene with Glodka, where he just kind of explains everything he's been doing the whole 3 books, might be one of my favorite scenes in the whole trilogy.
It's so good. It's maniacal and perfect. I loved that whole scene.
He's just been playing this like very complex game of like 4D chess with himself,
With
basically.
himself. Yeah, exactly. Oh man. Yeah, that's the
um,
thing. Like Bias is moving all of the pieces except the Emperor of Gurgle. Like everything else is Bias.
like literally everything, the conspiracy with the bank, everything
So
in
good.
England, all of it was biased.
All of it was him. And you're just sitting there going, okay, this really was all you. And he himself is such a layered character because we see all the different faces of him, right? Where he
Mhm.
is wanting to appease you when he is angry with you, demeaning you, when he is out to kill you. Uh,
Just
he
making you
is
not exist anymore when he's
he
angry.
is very quick to anger. Him in the house. I can't remember the name of the house that
The
they
House of the
built.
Maker.
House of the Maker, yeah, in Adua was a phenomenal scene when he
Mhm.
realizes that his Padawan per se has been taken over and
Mhm.
is no longer themselves, and then his Magi brother that's like been stuck in the House of the Maker, and he just is like, well, bye, and takes off. Like he's a piece of shit, Baez, most of the time,
Mhm. And
but
like
I love it.
I love when like we kind of meet like the really less villainous other magi, and like they're all like,
Yes,
Baez, you have to stop, you're fucking crazy.
yes,
And we as the reader, I just kind of took that as like, well, like they just don't want to do what it takes to save the union. But
yes.
actually he just was that fucking evil the whole
Yes,
time.
he was terrible. He was absolutely terrible. And it makes you think back to all of the stories that he's told, Giselle specifically, and you're like, how many of these things were you involved in yourself, and how much of this is your fault?
Yeah.
Uh,
Um And I think Last Argument of Kings really sets up that reveal very well because really odd things happen in like the first half of Last Argument of Kings. Like when
yeah.
there's like the workers' rebellion and Giselle's supposed to go out and stop it, and they basically like immediately surrender.
Yeah.
Because I was like, okay, I'm not really sure what the point of that was, and then later I'm like, oh,
Derry says the best moment in the trilogy for me was the MacGuffin being false. Glorious. Why am I blanking
maybe I
on
don't
this?
know the context. What's a MacGuffin again?
Yes, explain this to us, Derry. um, yeah, for me, I don't know if I have a best moment in the trilogy, but I did love every time Valentin and Bulk showed up in Costco. And Galacto was like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with all of this money that I now have and this deal that I've made? I greatly enjoyed that plot
Oh,
significantly.
absolutely.
So funny.
I think I probably have a favorite moment with each character. Yeah, but like in terms of like an overall favorite moment, that would be very hard to pick because they all kind of rely on each other. Item as plot device. Oh yeah, so like the seed, like
Oh
the
yeah, the seed.
whole arc of before they're hanged, like they're going to get the seed from
The
that temple,
seed.
and it's
And
just
you're
a
just
fucking
like,
rock.
oh cool, it's nothing. But I felt like that was so realistic though. It's like you put all of your hope into this one item and then you're just like, yeah, it's useless.
Yeah, I'll go all the way back.
Yes.
I think one of my favorite moments for Glatka was in Before They're Hanged. He's torturing the ambassador for the Gurkish.
Yeah.
And he goes on this like long, strange monologue about men's
Yeah.
nipples.
Yep.
And then he's like, so we don't really need that, right? And just shaves it off, that guy. Oh, excellent moment. 10 out of 10
Yeah.
Glatka moment.
Caleb is a big horror reader and writer, if people don't know.
Oh yeah, so like the violent, gross stuff, like that's what I'm into. So basically, every torture scene with Glatka was the best scenes in the book.
So for me, I loved his torture scenes because Frost and Severard were usually there, and the dynamic and conversation between the three of them. So funny. And I did not see the betrayal coming.
Neither did I.
Yeah, I was so surprised. I was like, oh, how dare they? Oh, I was heartbroken.
I know. I was listening. I was doing the dishes, listening to it, and I literally went, "Frost, no!"
Exactly. You just want to be like, what are you doing? Oh man, but made perfect sense. Yeah, Severard. Stephen Pacey's voice for Galacta is arguably the greatest audiobook thing that's ever happened. It's 100%
made the book. So,
oh my God. I didn't listen to the first book. I physically read the first book and the second, actually. And then I only listened to the audio for the third. And as soon as I heard Pacey doing Severard, I about lost my mind. I was like, that is perfection. And I don't know why I didn't give him a lisp in my head because he 100% would have one. Oh, 10 out of 10.
Absolutely stunning. And like, again, the Pacey's credit, like the way he was able to distinguish everyone's voices so well, even listening at 2x speed, like you could tell who everyone was when they were talking.
Yes. And he does that for all of the books, including the standalones. It's been so good. It's been over a year since listening to Pacey. I cannot hear it. I agree. It's yeah, that I was also doing dishes and had to put them down because I was laughing so hard. I was like, that is just 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10 stories.
Love the audiobooks. Love them.
Thoughts on the bird scene?
The bird scene.
Yeah, I haven't read this in a year, so I'm gonna need some specifics, Britton. Which bird scene are we talking about here? Do you recall anything?
I don't recall any bird scenes.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just losing my mind.
It'll come. We're both parents. We're lucky we remember this much.
Yeah. I'm actually shocked by how much, because this is also my first time listening to an audiobook at 2x speed.
Oh yes, when Pharaoh spares Severard for his love of Pharaoh is Pharaoh. Oh man, what were your thoughts of Pharaoh?
What a wild card character. I didn't like Pharaoh at first, but the more she was kind of around, the more I liked her, and the more she seemed like the only remotely sane person.
Yeah. I actually felt very similarly. The thing that frustrates me about Pharaoh is that she, exactly as Derry just said, she's underwritten. She's one-dimensional, especially compared to our other characters. And it's so evident from the way in which Abercrombie writes that we know he's capable of writing these really complex characters. But he only did it for his male characters in the first trilogy, which was really a bummer. And exactly, I wanted to hear more from her, especially because she's a victim of abuse. Like her backstory, it had such an opportunity to really go into her mental headspace, especially because his inner monologue writing is so good. It's perfection. If anyone ever wants to study how to do an inner monologue, I always just say, go read Abercrombie because no one does it better. He is the absolute best. So
Actually, I plan on a YouTube video for doing just that. Shameless plug.
Right. Britton says, I really liked when she and Logan got together. Jerry says, so did I. And I did too. I actually thought they were really a good balance between each other.
Funny story. The scene where they get together, I was listening to it on my Bluetooth speaker, like here at my desk. And it's the only scene my wife walked in on.
And I'm sure she was
the
like,
whole
well,
trilogy. And she's like, what are you listening to? I was like, I swear it's not always like this. This is like the only time, except for 2 other times before that.
So one of the things that Abercrombie does that I actually really love, especially because I'm now thriving in my romantasy era, is that Abercrombie writes intimacy and sex into his books in a way that a lot of the time I feel is accurate, in that it's not these people having these grand love affairs where it's, you know, 2 people that were destined to meet each other and fall in love. It's 2 people who are questionable, Logan and Pharaoh, Giselle and Artie, Glocta and Artie, end up in a situation where you're kind of just like, well, want to? Yep. And they're like, yeah, might as well. It feels so akin to human nature, and so many authors shy away from it. And this is something that you and I have talked about a little bit about off screen, in the sense that I get very persnickety over the fact that I feel we have quantified and qualified good fantasy for the fact that good fantasy doesn't have sex in it. And that just simply isn't the case. And I don't know why we have accepted that as a standard norm for fantasy. And I love that Abercrombie really just doesn't care about that and incorporates it pretty much into every single one of his books. Of the 6 books of his that I've read, people are getting it on. And you go, yep.
And it's the way he does it too. So, because like there's all kinds of reasons like why I think sex is coming gate kept out of the genre. Sexism being a big part of it, right? But like there's something about like how, kind of like what you said, like how human, but like it feels like primal and animalistic a lot of times. But there's this underlying emotion to it. I mean, like Giselle and Artie's sex scene, right? Like Giselle has so many complicated emotions while it's happening. It just feels very natural and very human.
It's so true you mentioned that, right? Because we don't, again, underwriting the female characters. This is my one major critique of the first Law trilogy, is that the female characters, we don't get enough into their POVs and perspectives. I would have really loved had that been the case. But we do get that with Giselle, where he almost feels dirty and bad for what he's doing, especially in the last book, where he knows he's not going to be able to end up with Artie as much as he wants to. He keeps going back because he just can't say no. How many people have you met in your life that have done that, where they're in a situation or a relationship and you go, this is not going to end well, and they're like, I'm going to ride this out until the absolute last possible second before it implodes. You know? And we all know that person. Every single one of us has met somebody like that or been that person. So I love that he incorporates that.
It's not a problem until it is.
Exactly. Derry says, I like that Abercrombie recognizes that real life sex is rarely a profoundly loving soul moment of kismet. Exactly. It can be something that even in the moment, you know, is a dumb idea. 100%. I agree so wholeheartedly. Usman says, maybe one day I'll open up and do a little live stream about my childhood, Derry. It won't be a fun time though. Usman, we're here for you whenever you want to have that chat. But I speaking of that though, I do feel like he does a decent job in terms of representing people that have experienced trauma, especially in the case of Artie. I wish we would have had more of that with Pharaoh. And I feel like in a lot of cases we get that with Logan. Oddly enough, I don't know if I feel that with Glocta in a lot of the same ways. Just because
that feels very intentional, though.
Yes, exactly. Like Glocta is very much lamenting who he used to be, and I can relate to that very deeply. I talk about it openly on my channel that I've had multiple concussions and head injuries and stuff, and it has greatly impacted my life. I had a meltdown about it last week to my husband, just saying, you spend every day of your life being one specific person, and then in a blink of an eye, you're no longer able to be that person anymore, and you have to grapple with becoming a new person. And I feel like that's Glocta. in a lot of ways, where he's just
Mm-hmm.
in his head, he is the fencing champion and he is the good-looking man, and he's become this monstrous human being in terms of his physicality and his soul. They've both been quite stained. But
Mm-hmm.
you see that trauma really more so with the female characters, I feel like, which is why it would have been more interesting if Artie would have been a POV and we maybe would have dug into that a little bit deeper with
Yeah.
Pharaoh for me.
No, absolutely. Because he does do it so well, and like I don't know if it's just a fear of like, at least as a younger writer, he thought maybe he couldn't do the psychology of women as well.
Yeah, maybe not.
But I mean, like, I don't think there's like that big of a distinction between writing women and writing men beyond
No.
like thinking systemically how that they would be treated differently.
Sure.
So but like I can understand a male author, especially what these came out 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Something like that. But yeah, but I don't know if he ends up writing more women. Does he? Do we actually get
Yes.
Pharaoh POVs?
We don't get Pharaoh POVs to my understanding, but the Age of Madness trilogy is the one of, I think it's mostly female protagonists.
Nice.
And that the lead is Giselle and Artie's daughter.
Oh.
So that's interesting. It's the changing of the guard. We get the next generation of children that are kind of at the helm of this. But
I didn't realize it was that tightly together. For some reason, I thought the Age of Madness was like 100 years later. So
no, it's just the next generation of people. But
nice.
Most people say that is his best work, especially his character work in terms of everybody, and the women are at the forefront.
And that's like A Little Hatred. That series of books.
Trouble with Peace and the Wisdom of
Crowds.
Yeah. I'm looking at it here without my glasses and going like, yep, I think that's what it is. I know that there's
Feast for Crows, I think.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. It's right above my Feast for Crows. I was like, it could be either or. Yes, exactly, Derry. I am eager to get through it. That's why I'm pushing through this final standalone so I can get to Age of Madness, because I'm wanting to read it so badly. So we get world building much slower in First Law than we do in other books. How did you feel about not really knowing too much about the world in the first book?
So the way he does world building is the way I prefer it. I don't really like, again, not to make the Sanderson comparisons, but like the Sanderson style of it, where like we get a lot of information about how everything works, kind of like front loaded to us, and that pays off later. I much more prefer this kind of like loosey goosey, like, yeah, I vaguely know what a union is, so I kind of know how that government would work. So I prefer that kind of like trickling out the information as it's relevant approach.
I agree. I loved that book 2 basically was our getting to know the world. And I just loved this in book 2. The journey to the old empire, I thought was amazing. I loved that storyline. Plus we have our little ragtag misfit crew that go on this little journey together. We've got our unwilling found family.
That's a good way to put it. Because
I loved it.
Because they definitely feel like siblings with strained relationships after a certain point. One of my other favorite scenes is from that crew after that first big battle when Giselle gets his jaw messed up. Logan is trying to make him
anymore.
Not as pretty anymore, but Logan's trying to make him feel better about it. He's like, it's okay. That's a wound that would give you a name, and they're like, really, like, yeah. What kind of name? It's like, oh, something like Half Jaw.
So I ended up really loving the Logan and Giselle dynamic in book 2. It's something that I didn't think I wanted, and as soon as I got it, I was like, I was so wrong. This is great. I love this so very much, because you have our typical prim proper character that's a prick, and then you have our typical lowly uneducated character, and Logan is just schooling Giselle in life for like 300 pages.
Yeah.
And This is really where we see Abercrombie try to do this transition of, can people change? Because Logan wants to be a better person when he's in this group, and Giselle wants to be like Logan. And it's so funny to me because he puts Logan on this pedestal, and I'm like, Logan has done so many terrible things, and I'm like, I get where you're coming from because he's trying to be a good person, but also he's still a terrible person deep down too. So
yeah. So yeah, I love Giselle's arc.
Well done, Derry.
Props, please. Oh man, I lost my train of thought reading that comment.
I'm sorry.
No.
We were talking about how Giselle puts Logan on a pedestal and wants to be like.
Oh yeah, well, and I was just gonna use that to springboard to like, I just love Giselle's arc in general. Like, I loved how much of just again, what a prick he is in the Blade itself, to this like very humbling journey he has, and before they were hanged, to sort of kind of going back to being a little bit of a prick in once he gets back.
Big time. So Giselle in book 3 is so funny to me because he feels like in book 2 it's like a kid going through college, Giselle, right? Like, he's taking his Logan classes, he's learning, he's about to get his diploma, and Baez is like, thought you were getting your diploma, turns out you're going to be king. And Giselle's like, what? And has no idea how to grapple with everything. And in a lot of ways, he's sympathetic in this, that his whole life kind of blows up, right? And as much as we judge Giselle for being that quintessential pretty boy, obsessed with their looks character, any person could relate to the fact that if you're partially disfigured after something, like, it's going to affect you mentally. So he's dealing with that. He's dealing with the fact that his father is not his father. And
his whole life is a lie.
His whole life is a lie. He's now going to have to be king. He can't have the woman that he wants. Because I think he loves Artie. I think so, in his own way.
Yeah, I think in his mind, I could see he loves Artie.
I think he thinks he loves Artie. Whether or not he actually does, questionable. And then he's thrown the worst wife ever. She is horrendous, like absolutely horrendous. 10 out of 10 would not recommend her to anybody.
No. Their whole scene where, like, after they're married and like he just like goes like touch her a little bit, she's like, get off of me.
Yeah. Totally didn't call that she was a lesbian. But when I read it, I was like, makes perfect sense.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'd agree. Yep. I was like, after the fact, I was like, oh yeah, that adds up actually.
Yep, makes perfect sense. And then simultaneously, he's there pining for Artie, and you're just like, what has happened to this poor kid? Exactly, the Queen Derry. She was hilarious. I thought she was super funny because she was terrible.
I agree.
Is it Baez? Who threatens her? Is it Baez or Glokta?
It's Glokta.
It is Glokta. That's what I thought. Okay, yeah. I loved that scene too. I thought that was so good. And it's funny to me too, because Glokta's forced into a position where he has to help Giselle, his enemy of all enemies. Glokta's hatred for Giselle was something that I enjoyed greatly.
Oh, absolutely. Every moment he got to hate on Giselle for paragraphs, he did.
Yeah, he did. And I loved all of it.
Every single bit of it. Every word out of Glokta's mouth I loved.
Exactly. So we've talked a lot about our Adua characters. How did you feel in terms of our story wrapping up for our northern friends?
So again, I think I'd say I liked Dogman through book 1, book 2, but like, I didn't really care about that plot at all. But like once Logan goes to the north to kind of like get this shit wrapped up, that's when it got really cool. Like because a big critique you and I have had too is like we didn't really care about the fight scenes, and I think that's largely very true until like this book.
Yes.
Because his duel with like the champion through Dogman and the others like killing the witch.
Yeah.
I loved all of that.
Yeah, I did too.
And seeing Logan go full bloody 9 in that fight was incredible.
Yeah. In book 3, I really loved the scene where Logan and Bethod go at it. Because you realize Bethod is a product of Logan, which I thought was so fascinating. I was like, you really don't, it takes you off guard completely, where you think he's this monster that's kind of just been terrorizing the North, and you're like, no, he is a response to Logan, which I
Because
thought was so
Logan
good.
killed his brother, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So half of it was just motivated by revenge against Logan. So
Yeah,
like
I mean,
basically everyone Logan meets, because that's the other interesting thing too, is once Logan goes back to the Northmen, which is kind of what he's wanted the whole time, he realizes that almost everyone hates him.
yeah.
And he realizes like, oh, I've killed someone that's close to literally everyone I know.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because you see how everyone is kind of tentative around him, and Dogman I think is the only one that actually appreciates the fact that Logan has come back. And even then he thinks this is going to be a lot more complicated now that you're here, and I'm going to have to be put in a very awkward position. I agree that I was kind of on Dogman until the 3rd book, in which I really liked him. Thanks for stopping by, Usman. Hope you enjoy the rest of your trip. We'll see you when you get back. And I loved watching him try to be a chief, especially with trying to rein in Black Dow. I was like, good luck to you. He's
who
crazy.
who has just kind of been on a leash the whole time anyway.
Yes.
I feel
He's
like we literally
waiting.
don't even see how bad he is until the end.
Yeah, I love Black Dow so much. And so Josh ended up reading the whole series. Josh is my husband, for people who don't know, the whole series ahead of me. And he kept asking as I was reading, he's like, so who are you really liking? And I was like, well, Black Dow, obviously. And then in the Northman, I was like, Black Dow. The second he came onto this page, like, just insane. I was like, he's a character that steps out of a Greek tragedy, like, and is just a monster. I'm like, I love him. He's insane in all the best ways. And I was conflicted with how his story ended in the first trilogy with him and Logan. I was like, I don't know if I liked it or not when I read it at first. I like it now, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I could see that, because I think it kind of left me on not a sour note per se, but I was like, nah, not the strongest end to the book. But the more I've thought about it, the more I like it. And like it makes sense. Again, Black Down is just kind of unhinged and is like waiting to unleash.
Yes.
And I like thematically the bookend of the series begins and ends with Logan falling off a cliff.
Falling off a cliff, yeah. If you're wondering, has he survived? So, what is your feeling on Logan at this point? Not having read anything other than the first trilogy, I'm just reminding people, do not put your known knowledge in the comments, whether he is alive or not. I just want Caleb's opinion.
I feel like he's alive. At this point, Logan has survived worse than falling off of something.
Right.
So I don't know when he'll come back. I imagine, because I know the Heroes is Black Dow's book. So I think it'd be interesting if it was a Blacked Out perspective book and Logan was like the villain of it.
Oh, that book, The Heroes. It's probably, I don't know if it's my favorite book, but if not, it's tied with The Blade itself.
I know there's a character in it that's like on par with Glockday, you say?
Oh my God. Yes. In terms of inner monologues, it's as good. He's such a fucked up character, but it's so good. I cannot wait for you to read it so we can talk about him, because he's great.
Well, I've got Best Served Cold hot on the deck, so once I'm through that.
And then you got to jump right into The Heroes. The one thing that I will say to you that I heard someone say that I thought was really poignant is that think of Derry, you got to read the heroes. Think of Best Served Cold as Shiver's story and see if that resonates with you as opposed to.
Say that one more time.
When you start reading Best Served Cold, the main character is presented as Monza. But if you read it as the main character being Shivers, I think it makes the book more interesting.
Okay.
But that's not a spoiler. It's just those are characters in that book.
Those characters. Think about it that way.
Yeah, think about it that way, and it'll be really good. But any final thoughts on our first law experience? Any scenes of note that we haven't discussed, like Mathos from Valentin Polk?
I mean, there's so many things we haven't touched on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, I'm hoping if you listen to the whole chat, you at least vaguely remember reading the series. I hope you didn't just listen to a spoiler chat. But I think my only critique of the first law is like it is character driven to a fault, I think.
Yeah.
Based on how you enjoy reading. Because I've been telling people about it as I've been reading. It's like you should read these books, and they're like, okay, but what happens? Like, where's the story go? And I'm like, like it's kind of hard to articulate because like it's all put together very methodically, and it pays off really well in the Last Argument of Kings.
Yeah.
But I feel like people just reading the first book to see whether or not they like it is the worst decision anyone can make.
I agree. I really do think it's kind of like Lord of the Rings in that way, where I feel like it's one big story that's been chopped into 3. So I would agree with you there. But I have less of that feeling than I think you do, where I do think that they do stand alone well. But of course, they're brilliant when they're back to back. Yeah.
Well, it's like my favorite thing to do is like when I love a book, I love reading 1-star reviews of it. And I think it's fair, or I can understand people's reactions of reading it and being like, I got to the end, I felt like literally nothing happened. I was like, I felt like I read a 500-page prologue. I was like, well, yeah, you kind of did.
I didn't feel that way at all. I felt so much happened. I felt so much happened, but I am very much in the minority of that, which
I mean, so much did happen on a character level, and I think that a lot of fantasy readers are plot-driven readers.
Yeah.
So like the first law is great because it's so different in that sense, and he does it so well. But I can understand people who like have these very specific expectations of how fantasy books are supposed to be.
Sure.
Going into it and maybe not having the best time.
Yeah, I agree. He really, I think, does turn the genre on its head in many ways. And in terms of authors, when I'm trying to convince people to read Abercrombie, I'm like, well, if you've liked Martin, you might like Abercrombie just in terms of the grimdark aspect of it, and that characters generally aren't really good in this series.
That's so funny. Oh,
go ahead.
No, finish your thought. No, I interrupted your thought. Oh. I was just gonna say I know they get compared a lot, Martin and Abercrombie, but these books are so different. I don't know if I like the comparison.
So different.
Other than like, yeah, vaguely there are no good characters.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, but like they're completely different books.
That's the thing. In terms of books that are like First Law, there's really not many.
Yeah, there's really not a lot.
No, because of the fact that I think in many ways it's kind of niche in that it is grimdark, it's high epic fantasy, it's low magic, and it's very character driven. And that doesn't tend to be the norm in a lot of what we see right now. I feel like when we do get grimdark, it tends to be more plot driven than character driven, even though we do get good character work in there. It's just not the same as Abercrombie.
I almost think in a weird way, I think the Hobb comparison is better than the Martin comparison.
Yeah, Gary's definitely on board there.
Because I've only read Assassin's Apprentice, but within that book, I mean, that book does not really have a plot, but all these little character moments add up to something so significant at the end. I think that's way closer to the structure of the Blade itself than the Blade itself is to a Game of Thrones.
100%. I would completely agree. Okay, I think we're gonna wrap up. Caleb, why don't you tell the good people where they can find you on the YouTube?
Yeah, you can look me up. I'm Celebrity. I think my name is on the screen, maybe not.
I will get
I'm
rid of the
Celebrity.
banner and then it will be. There we
I'm
go.
Celebrity. I do dark fantasy and horror book-ish content mostly. I recently started doing like writing analysis videos. I did a big in-depth video about the world building in chapter 1 of Greenbone Saga. I really enjoyed doing that. I plan on doing a video about inner monologue with the Stair chapter with Glotka. I've really been enjoying doing stuff like that because I'm also a writer, so that I want to focus more on content like that. And yeah, I'm also on Instagram. Same thing, Celebrity. You'll find me. It's this face. And that's it. That's really the only places I exist, unless you're on the Unexpected Party Discord, which I am on irregularly, but I am there.
Yeah, that's generally the same for me. I will have your information linked in the show notes so people can find you. But thanks for coming on to chat with me about First Law. When you read the standalones, we can do another one and we can chat all about those.
Yes, and then we'll do another one for the Age of Madness.
Yes, which I'm hoping to maybe start next week.
So and then you'll have me on when I read Akatar. So which
I don't
is
know if we can talk about two more different things, Akatar and First Law, in the same chat.
It's on my R Fantasy bingo card now. So
it's varied here at Fantasy Watch. Everyone's welcome. All right, everybody, have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, I appreciate you spending your time with me, with us. If you are watching this on a replay, let us know in the comments down below what your feelings on First Law are. If you liked the ending, if you didn't like the ending, what your favorite book is, and just some love for Sanda and Glockta. You can just put Glockta and a whole bunch of hearts down there. I'll know exactly what you mean. If you want to follow me as well, my information will be linked there too. If this is your first time here, welcome. You can give us a like and subscribe, and please go follow Caleb as well, because really his videos are great, and Caleb, as you've now seen, is a delightful human being. So everybody, have a great night. Thank you so much. Love your face too, Derry. We will see you guys next time.
Bye.